Alright, so I'm going to show you how to prune your micro dwarf tomatoes so they can keep producing, and when you should prune them and how do you know when it's time to prune them. Okay, so first of all, this tomato variety is a micro dwarf, and these micro dwarfs are usually considered determinate tomatoes. So once they put out their fruit, that's it, they're done. That's what determinate tomatoes do. But with these micro dwarf tomatoes, it's not quite like that. It kind of works a little differently. It's more like a semi-dwarf variety. So what they do is they put out their fruit, and then they're done, but they don't die. So what happens is, like over here, as you can see, it's putting out these other stems down here, down here. Providing you cut the plant and you take off this excess end off the top where it's just drawing useless energy that's not going to produce fruit or anything anymore. Once you cut that, you're severing the vascular system of the plant that goes up to feed that. Once you cut that, it resets the plant to start over again. So you need to do a surgery here and just snip that off and snip that off. You can leave these for now, but eventually take those leaves off as well. Like there's some of these older ones. You want to take all, you could even do that now if you wanted to. I usually leave them on so it's able to pick up some more sunlight, helps these little stems grow. But basically what you want to do is what I'm going to do right here. See, just like this. Just so you know, these stems are almost like cutting branches. They're not like regular tomato plants. They get very, very hard like wood. So we took the whole top of that plant off. We're going to leave these two leaves on for now. And then, I mean, if you want, you can actually take those off, and these stems will just, it'll put all its energy into these stems. But I usually leave a couple leaves on there, cut that part off, and then let this part grow. And we're going to do the same thing to this over here, without, cutting the other stuff here. Something like that. And I think I am going to take this one leaf off here. We're going to take that one off. We're going to leave these two, and they'll come off. We're going to leave these two, and they'll come off once these start growing, because I want to get them out of there. So once they start coming up and they're starting to grow, we'll be good to go. But as you can see, there's nothing left except these little shoots that you see coming up. Here, 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 here. And what I'll do is once they start coming up and growing again, I'll bring you back, and then we'll see what it looks like in a couple of weeks. I don't think it's going to take too much longer than, say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So in about 2 or 3 weeks, we'll come back, we'll visit it again, and I'll show you what these look like in about 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so here we are. It's already, I believe, 9/3/2020. It's already September, and so I figured I'd give you an update on this and show you from the last pruning how we are doing with pruning the micro dwarf tomatoes. So as you can see, it's already got tomatoes on it and plenty of flowers. The plant is generally staying pretty small, and it will bush out a little bit. Now keep in mind that the reason why it's not overly bushing out is because it's the end of the year and it's just simply not getting enough sunlight. So that's why you're not seeing an incredible amount of growth on it. So it is minimal growth, but once I bring this plant in and put it under regular lighting that's under a timer every day, you'll see the growth on this plant pick up a lot more. But just wanted to give you an update as to how it looks, about a month later from the time that I originally pruned it. So they will come back, but they will die sometimes too. When they do reach a certain point and they'll just drop dead, it really depends on how much light they got, how conducive the environment is for them, and is the light receding? Is it building up? What's going on? What time of the year is it? And so that's going to make a big difference as to whether your micro dwarfs will live on or they're just going to die if they're just not getting enough light. Because these are determinate plants, or maybe even semi-determinate, like I like to consider them. But they will produce more fruit, as you can see here. So this is it right here. And so that's basically really about it. I just wanted to give you the final view of it, about a month later after I pruned it. Now again, like I said, this tomato variety, these particular micro dwarf variety of tomatoes, they will get bushy again if you give them enough light and feed them. if there's just not enough light, and they're just going to really grow really slow, and they're just going to be sparse with vegetation. Now this plant here, as you can see, there's virtually no leaves on it, but yet it's loaded with flowers and tomatoes. So it doesn't need a whole lot of foliage to actually produce tomatoes. But again, if you want these plants to get bushy and you want to keep them alive, you're going to have to keep them under, a lot of light, a lot more than normal light for these plants. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to prune them back, you got to increase your light so they start to sense like, hey, it's springtime and we need to put out more foliage. And do feed them once in a while. I haven't fed these plants in a while, so maybe I'll do a feeding today. But definitely give them a little bit of a feed on it and increase your lighting, and you should have good results. They should come back fine and dandy. Here's some of the other ones that I pruned. You can see that there's more vegetation coming up here. Some of the old vegetation's rotting off. Don't worry about cutting off the old vegetation. Not until the new vegetation grows to where you want it, and then prune off some of the old stuff. This is like a secondary or tertiary pruning. I'm not referring to the initial pruning that you did. Anytime I see old bracts on here and there's no tomatoes on it because they've all been picked off or whatever, you want to remove those bracts. And again, with the runt tomatoes, anytime you see any runt flowers that basically, like on here, this bract could probably get pruned off. You can see it's very rigid. There's nothing left on it. Runt tomatoes are basically tomatoes that there's a little tiny tomato in it and it doesn't turn into a tomato. You want to remove those from the plant anytime you see them, because your plant's still sending energy to it thinking it's going to turn it into a tomato, and it's just not going to. So you want to remove those. You want to make sure you get them off your plant, and any of these empty bracts like I have on this one, now that I'm looking at it, need to be removed. Now this is called the Tiny Tim. This is not a micro dwarf, but if you prune it enough and you keep it in good shape, it'll grow like a micro dwarf. But it's not meant to be a micro dwarf. It's actually just a dwarf variety. These can get quite tall. They can get up to like 30, maybe 34 inches high and bushy. So they can get pretty big. So micro dwarfs will never get that big. As you can see, this one's doing pretty good. Now these are, I don't know if these are stems or if these are other plants, because I did drop a few seeds in here, and from the same, like the tomatoes fell and I just squeezed a couple of seeds into it, and they're growing. So this plant may end up dying because of that. I'm not sure, but it is putting out some foliage. I'm just not seeing any new flowers. There's one here. This might be a runt that I'm referring to, but I don't know. You can't tell until, yeah, I might remove that flower. That's like a runt. A runt is like basically, I'm going to try to show you what a runt is. It came off anyway. A runt looks like this. It's basically a tomato that forms, and it'll sit there for months and it'll never grow. It never develops into a tomato. And when you see those, you got to get them off your plant, because those runts draw energy from the plant, as if the plant is thinking, it has a tomato that has to form, instead of working on the tomatoes it already has. So you want to make sure you remove any runt tomato flowers off your plant. Just be sure it's a runt and just not a new flower. Just make sure that you know what you're doing before you remove any of those flowers. But the runts you want to get off. But yeah, this one's doing pretty good. It's starting to get some growth right here. That was recently pruned. And one of my other micro dwarfs did die. I think it was the Pinocchio. That one did die off. I was a little surprised at that. So that one died. But this one here, the Florida Petite, this thing is a workhorse. It is definitely putting out a ton of tomatoes. This thing needs to get cleaned up. It looks like there's a bunch of leaves burning off. I don't know if this is blight or it's just I don't know, just old leaves, because these leaves can be as old as from when I started it. And so the leaves sometimes they sometimes get this burning look on them and stuff like that. It's just the old leaves are dying off and it needs to come off. But pick some of that off of there. But yeah, this is a great variety. If you're going to buy a micro dwarf, definitely go with the Florida Petite. And the reason why is that this variety is extremely heavy producer for a tiny micro dwarf. This thing was produced so many tomatoes for me, it's incredible. So this is definitely a production machine right here when it comes to tomatoes on the microdwarf varieties. That's a machine right here. This thing just keeps producing. In fact, this plant is old already. You see, it's so old, there's not, everything just disappeared off it. This plant's old. This plant's been around for over a year, maybe a year and a half now, going on 2 years. We'll see if we could keep it around, go a little longer, but it's a very old plant, and it's still producing tomatoes, and it's just absolutely amazing. And this one here, I think, is only about maybe 3/4 of a year old. I think I planted that this year. This one here is really old. This one's been around for a while. You can see, look at the stem on that thing. Look at that, it's like a piece of wood. Incredible. All right, so that's it. That was just a quick video on just basically pruning your microdwarf tomatoes to get more production out of them and hopefully keep them alive for longer periods of time. That's just my 2 cents about it. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.